Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Bucket Think Tank for the Life and Times of Scrooge McDuck, Part 5, The New Laird of Castle McDuck. So this is personally one of my favorite chapters. So real quick, where we left off last issue was Scrooge had, through a legal loophole, seized control of the Anaconda Coppermine, and he was all set to be the richest man in Montana. But then he got a letter from his father saying, "You got to come back here. Castle McDuck's in trouble. Bring money." So he accepts the check from Marcus Daly for his claim. So here we are in Part 5. So real quick, let's talk about exactly what Part 5 is and its relation to other bits of Disney canon, because we had some really fun stuff recently for the Ducktales 2017 show, and of course we already talked a bit about Castle McDuck in Part 1. So Scrooge is coming back to Castle McDuck in this Life and Time story, but in other iterations, namely, let's go with the 87 cartoon again, it's mentioned in Once Upon a Time that Scrooge never goes back to Scotland before the episode The Curse of Castle McDuck. So that person was a bit heart-wrenching here. And then we come to the 2017 version where, and this is actually one of the things that made me scratch my head at how stupid it sounded, where the question has to be, why are Scrooge's parents still alive? Scrooge in this one says that he rebuilt Castle McDuck, which I guess is a call to the story Hound of the Whiskervilles, where Castle McDuck is in ruins in that one. And he built the castle using ancient druid stones, which made his parents immortal. So the weird thing about that is, from a storytelling standpoint, it would mean that Scrooge's parents were alive when he rebuilt Castle McDuck, which could harken back to the Billionaire of Dismal Downs, but that's in Part 9, but that's something else entirely. So, again, to the 2017 version, the 2017 version also takes the story Letters from Home, or The Old Castle's Other Secret, if I'm not mistaken, that's the name of the story, where Scrooge, Donald, Huey, Dewey, and Louie go to Castle McDuck, and they're greeted by Matilda, Scrooge's other sister, and that story leads to the search for the treasure of the Knights Templar, and that story is really about Scrooge and Matilda sort of mending their relationship. Here, it's his parents, and his parents are just sort of just there. I mean, there's an interesting back and forth, I guess, with Scrooge and Fergus, but I think this story does a better version of it, which has been sort of a criticism I have of the 2017 Ducktales, is that there's not a lot of real emotional depth to it, a lot of real character interaction. A lot of it's played up for humor, and then when they try to give those emotional scenes, it doesn't quite work. It did work a bit in this specific episode we're talking about, with Huey, Dewey, and Louie finding out, or the coming to terms with the fact that Dewey kept secrets about their mother from Huey and Louie. That had a lot of emotional weight to it, I think, especially from Louie, who I think really saved that particular story. So let's sort of get back to our actual story. So Scrooge arrives in Castle McDuck. He's got the bank draft, and with him he's also brought his mother, Downy McDuck, and Matilda. And real quick, the first look we get, the first little Easter egg we get, in my opinion, is the reveal of Scrooge's glasses. So most people that know Scrooge McDuck knows that he wears glasses. But we never actually knew when he got the glasses. So here he explains that he got the glasses because the sunny skies and snowy plains of Montana mess with his eyes. And that's a relatively common thing in this time period. Snow blindness is still a thing. And this is the first time we'll actually see them, and he even mentions there'll be a point where I'll have to wear them all the time. But coming back to our actual story, Scrooge arrives, at Castle McDuck. He sees his father, Fergus, and his uncle Jake chasing some Whiskervilles out. If you remember, the Whiskervilles were sort of the Hatfield/McCoys to the McDucks being the Hatfield/McCoys. Or let's make it sound something a bit more interesting. The Montagues and the Capulets, the Starks and the Lannisters. The Lannisters and everyone else. Something along those lines. They're a feuding family, but they're not really like a seriously feuding family. But anyway, we find out that the Whiskervilles want to buy the land. They want to buy the land, and their father's already gone to get the sheriff, and he's going to throw the McDucks out. But they're quickly chased away by Hortense, Scrooge's youngest sister and the mother of Donald and Della, and then that's when Fergus gives Scrooge the rundown while Jake takes the girls back to town. Fergus says that even though they were chased out of Castle McDuck and Dismal Downs, their ancestors still pulled all their, all their income together, and the estate taxes had always been paid. But they've fallen so far behind now that they're going to lose the entire thing to the Whiskervilles. And Scrooge reveals the bank draft, and it turns out that that's just enough money to pay off the taxes and maybe a little bit left over. And Scrooge is feeling a bit, down about this. He's not quite, I think, at least from how I've interpreted, Scrooge feels a bit down that this is the best he can do. That, for one reason or another, all his work, he has just enough to bail his family out of trouble, and then he'll be back to square zero. And that has to be a bit more frustrating than being forced to give it up. There was a quote from Benjamin Franklin: "Necessity never made a good bargain." Scrooge needed the money, and he probably could have haggled more from Marcus Daly, but he didn't have the time. He was not in the position to do that. So Fergus tries to perk up, saying, "You've saved our ancestral castle. That's something grand." And that is then when we're met by Argus Whiskerville and Sheriff Fenton Whiskerville. Yeah, we see the problem here already. So Fenton Whiskerville comes up. He gives the spiel, that I'm the sheriff, blah, blah, blah. He's got the official thing and all, like, you can't pay, so please let me throw you out. And Fergus said, "We've got till tomorrow to pay the taxes, and my son Scrooge is already here with the money." And there's a little back and forth between them. Argus doesn't believe in, quote-unquote, a McDuck with money. And Scrooge is ready for this. He fires back and reveals that the ghost of Sir Quackley that scared their hair white as snow 6 years ago was his doing. And that sort of angers Argus, and as well as Fenton. So Fenton's freaking out, while Argus, meanwhile, says, like, you know what? He takes a metal gauntlet, slaps Scrooge, and challenges him to a duel. And at first, Fergus and Scrooge don't want to do it. Scrooge is still a bit, woozy for being hit with the metal glove. But Fergus points out dueling's illegal, and technically it's not even your glove. And Argus is then able to goad Scrooge by saying that McDucks are liars and cowards as well as tightwads. And Scrooge is all up and at him, and Fergus is like, liars and cowards indeed. And I want you to remember that little bit where Argus says McDucks are liars and cowards and tightwads. And Fergus' response is pretty much, we are not liars and cowards. I want you to remember that. So the real reason Argus is doing this is so in the middle of the fight, while it's all going down, Fenton will take the bank draft because they'll never get a replacement one in time. So the duel begins, and Scrooge honestly is just one-upping Argus Whiskerville. Scrooge has pretty much refined himself, all right? All this training, battling riverboat pirates. He learned how to knife fight Injun style, courtesy of Buffalo Bill. He had a fight with Sitting Bull, and he stopped sitting for a month. And it's all Argus can do just to sort of keep some distance and run off. Because remember, his plan isn't to win the fight. It's to distract everyone so Fenton can take the bank draft. So Scrooge chases Argus outside, and he's able to get the jump on Scrooge. And it's a really intimidating moment because Scrooge is about to possibly fall off the tower, and he's saved by a ghostly person showing up. And he puts the sword in Scrooge's hand. Scrooge knocks Argus Whiskerville out, and he's all happy. McDuck's triumphant until the crack of doom, and then Scrooge gets struck by lightning. And he falls down, and he's in the moat, because every castle has to have a moat. It's in the bylaws, and Scrooge is then hit by I really don't want to call it a brick. When it's in a castle, it feels like a brick is, understating it. He's hit by a bit of the castle, and he wakes up, finds himself in a room full of clouds, and he's greeted by a duck. And if those of you who've been following us remember him, this is Sir Quackley McDuck from The Life and Times of Scrooge McDuck Part 1, who was granted a chest of gold from King Macbeth, and he accidentally sealed himself in the castle trying to keep his treasure safe. So Sir Quackley admits, I was the one that handed your sword to you, but you should not be here. This is bad. This is bad. We gotta go. We gotta talk to them. But talk to who? The tribunal of the McDucks. And Scrooge's like, I've really done it this time. So our tribunal consists of Sir Roast McDuck, Sir Ader McDuck, Malcolm McDuck, and Captain Seafoam McDuck. And they're kind of not interested in what's going on here. They're like, oh, what's going on? What is this, Sir Quackley? We are busy playing golf because this is heaven and we're Scottish. And Sir Quack says, well, look, let's just check the Book of McDuck, and I'll prove to you that something's wrong here, and he shouldn't be here. So they check the book, and it turns out Sir Quackley interfered with earthly events. Had Sir Quackley not handed the sword to Scrooge, the lightning would have struck the castle tower, and would have distracted Argus Whiskerville. Scrooge would have disarmed him, and he would have won the duel anyway. Let's also point out that had this did happen, Fenton Whiskerville would have still had the bank draft, and they'd have lost the castle. So it's interesting to note how destiny works, but that's something else. So the tribunal's like, yeah, whatever, Quackley botched it. Let's just give the kids 9 iron and let's continue playing. So Quackley's like, no, he should go back. He deserves another chance. And this is the era of the clapback. So the clapback, for those you don't know, is Thanksgiving, you're with your family, and they all start talking stuff about you, and then you hit them back with something really hard. Alright? Now, this came out before the term clapback was used, but I think this is where it really came from. This is Don Rosa throwing shade before we actually knew what throwing shade meant. I still don't quite know what throwing shade is myself. But anyway, when Sir Quackley says that he deserves another chance, Sir Ada's like, well, he's unworthy, alright? He lost his riverboat in a pirate ambush. Sir Quackley comes back and says, really? You lost the Battle of 946 because you gave your men crossbows but no arrows. And Sir Ada points out, do you know what arrows cost in the 10th century? Well, Malcolm McDuck comes in. So, interesting, Malcolm McDuck is believed to be a past life of Scrooge. That's just a little something that I found fun. And so Malcolm McDuck says, well, he put all this effort into the cattle industry just before it went bust. He has no business sense. And that's interesting because, remember, we theorized that's why Uncle Pothole McDuck sold his riverboat to Scrooge, because he saw the coming of the railroads. That was my theory. And Sir Quackley's back again. Oh, really? Who went down with the Falcon Rover in 1564 on a treasure hunt for potatoes? All right, Sir Malcolm's got nothing to say. And Captain Seafoam comes in. Well, he had no right to sell my gold teeth. They were a family heirloom and not his. And Sir Roast agrees, and the boy sees that copper mine through a legal loophole. He's pretty much a thief. And Sir Quackley's ready again. Like, he says, need I remind you that Seafoam forfeited those teeth. He never passed them on. And really, Sir Roast, who ate himself to death here? You raided King William the Lion's Pantry. You literally died stealing food. All right? And what Sir Quackley's pretty much trying to say is, we've all made mistakes, but Scrooge is here because of a mistake I made. He shouldn't be punished for that. So then it's like, okay, so what are we going to do? What do you want us to do? So we're like, well, let's check the book again, see if he would truly be worth it. Let's see if he's really worth a second chance. And they look at it again. And they see a lot of interesting stuff. Nothing that really jumps out at them. You know, there's a place called Duckburg. There's a huge 3 cubic acre building full of money. And there's a hot-tempered nephew, which Scrooge is indication that Hortense will have a child. Less positive things. Namely the fact that, apparently Scrooge is going to constantly be robbed by a gang of masked fatties, hinting at the Beagle Boys. And Captain Steve points out, you saw how easily the Whiskerville sold his bank draft. And so I was like, wait, look at this. Fame, adventure, exploits, wealth beyond measure. He'll grow up to become the world's greatest adventurer. And they don't care. This falls on, and they knock the book down, and they decide, well, you know what, let's just keep playing golf. And that's when Scrooge reads from the book. He says that he says, and I quote, it says, I'll become the cheapest, stingiest, most miserly, turnip-squeezingest, penny-pinching tightwad on earth. And that's when all of McDuck Heaven gets quiet. They look at him. There's a gleam in all their eyes, and they grab him, they just hoist him up. Bravo, huzzah, hooray for Scrooge, the new Laird of Castle McDuck, because this is what it means to be a McDuck, people. This is what it means. It doesn't matter if you're super successful. It doesn't matter if you've got all this money, this fame, and people love you. How are you living your life? Are you living it by the McDuck standards? Remember what we noticed before. Liars and cowards indeed totally ignore the tightwads. They know who they are. And they know that these are things they will live and die by. And we've seen some of them have died by it. Because if you're just going to spend all your money wastefully, you're not a McDuck. If you're going to just say it's just money, who cares? All right, that's not what a McDuck is. A McDuck is someone who really values it. Remember what Sir Quackley said in part 1. McDucks fear no man born a woman, except maybe the tax collector. So they're like super happy. Okay, so we can put him back, but he has to get himself out of the moat. We can't help with that. So they're all thinking. Scrooge's like, so is this it? After all this, my life isn't worth a dime. He's like, that's it. Your life is worth the dime, that's it. So they send him back down there. He falls down and he wakes up and like, oh, wait, I'm underwater. I'm underwater. I gotta get out. Like, okay, I gotta find some way to undo this armor. Like, my dime. I'll use the dime to unscrew the bolts. And long story short, he arrives back in time before the Whiskervilles leave, gets back the bank draft, doesn't even quite remember how he knew about the bank draft. I think in a lot of ways that sort of mention may have hinted to the idea that Scrooge does sort of have a sixth sense when it comes to sensing his money. There was the Paul Bunyan machine story where Scrooge's rheumatism and arthritis and chest pains can sort of trigger when someone's about to take his money. That was a really fun story too. So the Whiskervilles' next plan is to, well, let's kill who the bank draft is payable to. And for a while, Fenton isn't quite on board with it. It's like, well, that really put them out of our hair. Who'll show up next? Argy's like, no one. Scrooge is the last of the clan McDuck. And that's when the ghost shows up. So like, aye, but he's the last of a long line, and we're all proud of him. And that scares the Whiskervilles bald. They run off, and The Ducktales 2017 cartoon tried to do this too, but I felt it was a bit lacking. In that one, the ghosts show up to scare the Hound away. This Hound being a creature that Sir Swampole McDuck used to protect the secret passageways. Whereas before, the Hound is a creation by either the Whiskervilles in the comic book universe and the Druids in the 87 cartoon. It's all for multiple different reasons. So as the sun rises, Scrooge says, it's time to be off, as Fergus tells, like, we've the bank draft paid it off with a little extra to spare. And Fergus and Scrooge have this really great moment where Fergus says, like, I've got nothing but faith that you'll find your pot of gold at the end of your rainbow yet. And they're meeting with this rainbow where Scrooge says there's always another rainbow. And that's a really heartfelt message. But I also want to talk about how much better this interaction is, primarily because there's not a lot of attempt to imply real teeth to it. And by that I mean, in the 2017 one, Scrooge and Fergus sort of come off as being at odds with each other. And it's sort of implied that Fergus is a lot like his own dad when it comes to his interactions with Scrooge. But the problem is, because it happens so sporadically and out of place and out of nowhere, it doesn't quite feel earned. Like, Scrooge never talks anything about his family at all until that episode. And it sort of adds an unnecessary dimension where Fergus even mentions, like, I'm the reason, I'm how you got the dime. Like, I gave it to Bert the Ditch Digger, and that's how, you got your dime. The beauty of Scrooge's relationship with Fergus is Scrooge never found out. Even Matilda, who knows, never tells him, because it doesn't matter, and he doesn't need to know. It sort of adds a sort of optimism to Scrooge, and it sort of cements the idea that Scrooge knows there are people out to cheat him. But with the reveal of Fergus being the one behind it, it sort of takes it away, at least from my experience with that story. But overall, Part 5 is one of my personal favorites, as I said before. There's a lot going on here, and it's a really, really confined space. I talked about before how I liked The Invader of Copper Hill because it stayed in Montana. This one just stays in the castle. Like, I'd even wager that, McDuck Heaven is right above Castle McDuck, which would also be really, really bad if the Whiskervilles had it. Because then McDucks are probably just going to, like, torment them. They'd be like, we are the ghosts of Castle McDuck. Get out. No. But anyway, with that in mind, we'll bring this video to a close here. If you're new to the Bucket Think Tank, feel free to like this video. Feel free to subscribe, especially that. If you've read any of this or seen any of it, I'd love to hear your thoughts on anything I might have missed. Feel free to leave that down in the comments section as well. Feel free to share this with your friends if you like them, your enemies if you hate them. Check out some of my other videos on this channel, really helps. And I will catch you all later. This is the Bucket Think Tank signing off. May your fandom serve you well.